Welcome to the next episode of NALA Talks, a microlearning series presented by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, or DEI Committee of NALA. My name is Terry Walters, and I'm the chair of the DEI Committee. The DEI Committee works to address diversity, equity, and inclusion to foster meaningful, open, and constructive dialogue throughout NALA and to celebrate diversity of its members and leaders. Today's conversation will focus on ageism with our esteemed panelists. Joining me today are NALA's DEI committee members. We have Candace Russell, Dana Feischl, Micaiah Clark, CP, Richard Hahn, Christina Praria, and our esteemed CEO, Vanessa Finley. All of our committee members are NALA certified paralegals. We encourage paralegals to obtain their CP designation through NALA. For more information on certification, please visit our website at www.nala.org. I'd like to turn it over to Candace Russell to introduce our first panelist, Michelle Porter, Dr. Michelle Porter.
Dr. Michelle Porter has a BPHE from Laurentian University, an MSc from Community Health, University of Toronto, and her PhD in kinesiology from UWO, which are capped by a multi-site MRC postdoctoral fellowship in Boston at New England Medical Center, Tufts University, and Sweden's Lund University. Throughout her career, she has studied many aspects of aging, including physical activity, neuromuscular function, mobility, older drivers, age-friendly environments, ageism, long-term care, vaccination decision-making, and age inclusivity in higher education. For 2 decades, she has been involved with an international research team, CanDrive, which studies older drivers. Her highly cited research has been funded by many agencies, including the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, and Canada Foundation for Innovation. Dr. Porter is the director of the Center on Aging at UM, a position she has held since 2015. She is a leader in the global age-friendly university movement and has been instrumental in championing age inclusivity activities at Canada's first age-friendly university. She is co-lead of the North American region for the Age-Friendly University Global Network and is part of the Age Inclusivity in Higher Education Working Group of the Gerontological Society of America. Dr. Porter has held executive positions with provincial and national community organizations, including chairing the Transportation Options Network for Seniors in Manitoba and holding many positions with Active Aging Canada. Welcome to NALA, Dr. Porter. And next to Dana Feischl to introduce our next panelist.
Hello, everyone. It's my personal pleasure to introduce Dr. Diane Martin, Associate Professor and Director of the Geriatrics and Gerontology Education and Research Program at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Graduate Studies. She is an applied gerontologist, educator, and scholar practitioner. She has over 15 years of experience advancing geriatric workforce development and promoting well-being of older adults. Her work bridges academic, policy, and community areas, and with focus on optimal aging, reducing ageism, and strengthening the capacity of professionals and caregivers. As a director, Dr. Martin leads statewide interprofessional education and training initiatives for students and professionals across Maryland. Through collaboration with organizations such as Maryland Area Health Education Centers and Maryland Department of Aging, she delivers high-impact programming that supports aging in place, caregiver education, and community engagement. Her efforts include student training across healthcare and social science disciplines, professional development conferences, and outreach to improve the lives of older adults and their families. Dr. Martin work spans cognitive health, mental well-being, social determinants of health, and functional independence. She leads training initiatives on cognitive disorders and mental health in later life, emphasizing early detection, stigma reduction, and culturally responsive care across long-term care, primary care, and community-based settings. Her scholarship explores person-centered care, interdisciplinary collaboration, and ageism. She holds PhD in psychology, her MS in law, and MA in experimental psychology. She is a member of Gerontological Society of America and Academy for Gerontology in Higher Education, and is immediate past president of Sigma Phi Omega, the International Honor and Professional Society in Gerontology. Welcome to NALA Talks, Dr. Martin. It's my privilege to turn the mic and screen to my esteemed colleague on DEI committee, Christine.
I'd like to introduce Kai Huffman, JD, ACP, CEDS, currently works as a paralegal manager at Freeman, Mathis & Gary, LLP, where she supervises a team of about 15 paralegals in several states. She has her JD from Northwestern California University School of Law, her BS in Paralegal Studies from the University of West Los Angeles, and is a NALA Advanced Certified Paralegal / California Advanced Specialist and ACEDS Certified E-Discovery Specialist. She has served on the board and as an officer and volunteer in her local and state paralegal associations, and was previously on the CEC for NALA. She was briefly an adjunct professor teaching aspiring paralegals civil litigation in an ABA-approved program. Kay lives in Missouri City, Texas, where she and her husband, Kurt, relocated after 2 years in Las Vegas, Nevada, having lived and worked in the greater Los Angeles area for most of her life. She is the mother of 2 grown sons and 3 much-loved felines. She was recently notified that she passed the California State Bar on May 1st, 2026. Congratulations.
Thank you.
As this micro talk is evolving around ageism, let's please first define what ageism is and how does it function as a form of bias or inequity with higher education. Dr. Porter, would you be so kind and start us off?
Sure, thank you for that question, and it's always important to start out with definitions. So I use the World Health Organization definition, which essentially says that ageism reflects how people think, feel, and act towards others or themselves solely on the basis of age. In other words, it involves stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination based on age. Now, this could apply to anyone of any age, whether young, middle-aged, or older. Most of the comments that I'm going to make today focus on older individuals. And within this, it is important to recognize that ageism can also be applied to the self, which is internalized or self-directed ageism. And this means that it can be, as I said, self-directed, or it could be that older people might have negative thoughts about other older individuals. And ageism can take many forms. It can be inter-individual, it can be in networks, institutional, or cultural. It can also be hostile, if you think of the boomer remover hashtag of the pandemic. Or it can also be done with the best of intentions, which is often called benevolent ageism. In this latter case, someone might think that they're doing someone a favor by doing something for them, but if they can do it themselves, then this is a paternalistic form of ageism that can be detrimental in many ways. Ageism, whether it's older or younger individuals, can be harmful for individuals, obviously, but it can also be harmful for society when individuals are not treated, or groups of individuals are not treated justly. For example, ageism can result in excess healthcare costs for society if internalized ageism convinces an older person that there's nothing that they can do to stay healthy, and they engage in negative health behaviors. So in terms of higher education, ageism can have effects on students, employees, as well as others who engage with them, like visitors. It might mean that an older individual who could be a potential student isn't even thinking about university and taking courses or a degree because they view it as solely being for young people. If an older person does decide to apply to a program or a course, then it might affect their admission or even their access to scholarships because others think they are too old or are unduly replacing young people who should be prioritized for places or funding. Older instructors might also have negative thoughts about younger students. Younger students might have negative thoughts about older instructors. Both of these things could create a classroom that has negative undertones. In terms of employees, as people age in positions of employment, they might be more likely to be passed over for training related to positions. If they don't retire when people expect them to, people might really treat them negatively because they think they're taking the job of a more deserving young person. And if they are treated in a negative way by colleagues or students, older employees might decide to retire earlier than they would have liked to have. And so those are just some examples of how ageism might have effects within higher education.
Now, I would like to ask the same question to Dr. Martin. Would you have something to add when it comes to ageism in higher education or in other sectors?
Thank you. I think Dr. Porter did a great job defining it. You know, it really is this idea of how we marginalize people through assumptions that we have about the aging process. And so we marginalize not just older people, but our future selves as well. As Dr. Porter said, that this is one of those biases that we can actually turn on ourselves when we assume that growing older leads to decline in disability, diminished value to society, cognitive decline, physical decline, etc. One thing I'd like to add is that this is really the only ism that is still under the table, not on top of it, right? We talk in society about racism and sexism, different cultural aspects, but we don't talk about ageism, and it seems to be accepted across our society when we think about the greeting card industry, when we think about the memes, as Dr. Porter pointed out during the pandemic, and even today, these memes are continuing. And so, you know, we laugh at those jokes, we maybe create some of those jokes, but that is a disservice to older adults and the value that they serve. It's very one-dimensional thinking about how we go through the aging process and about our future selves. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, that it really is the only ism that's still under the table, that it seems to be accepted in our society. Another thing that I would add in higher education, Dr. Porter mentioned about the cost of healthcare, and there's been some research coming out over the last several years showing the cost of ageism on our healthcare system. And there's a concerted effort across the Gerontological Society of America and others to reduce age bias in our training programs. So, for example, in our medical schools. And one of the problems is the individuals who would be educating our future physicians, our future nurses, et cetera, oftentimes hold these biases themselves. And so that's passing along that stereotyping, that bias, that ageism to future healthcare practitioners. So it's really important that we look at some of the tools that are available to reduce ageism and who's delivering those tools and how are those tools being delivered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will move and shift this to Kai. Very similar question, but as a recent graduate from the law school, would you be so kind as to enlighten us if you have experienced any assumptions about the age, both younger and older, that are still embedded and often normalized within academic culture today?
Thank you, Dana. I didn't in my own experience with the school because it was a non-traditional law school, so a lot of the students were older than traditional law students, but I do see it in the way people see themselves a lot, in that they don't think that they will be able to get value out of a higher education if they're older than the traditional students are. They feel like some people at 30 are feeling like if they go to law school or they pursue some kind of higher education that they've always wanted to do, that it's going to be a waste of money or a waste of their time. And I know personally, I when I was getting my fingerprints for the state bar, I was telling the fingerprint clerk that I had just graduated from law school and I had taken the bar and I was waiting the results. And she started crying and she said she was 42 and she always wanted to go back to nursing school and she feels like she was too old. And so I feel like part of the problem with ageism in higher education is just how we perceive ourselves, and that is a reflection in large part, I think, about how society looks at older people not being technologically savvy, or just that the amount of debt or what have you that goes into an education isn't worth putting into somebody that's older. And I would like to see us as a society make sure that people know that as long as they want to learn, there's value in learning in and of itself. And I think
thank you, Kate. I would love to now turn it to my colleagues on DEI. Who else will step in?
Thank you, Dana. My question is I would like to stick with Kay to answer this one. How do students of different age groups, including traditional age students, adult learners, and returning students, experience higher education differently?
I think older learners tend to want to learn for the sake of learning. Not everybody, of course. Some people, but I know from my own experience, in part as a student, it didn't matter to me as much. I have a successful career, but I wanted to do it, and it mattered to me to be able to finish it. And halfway through, I think my motivation for it was to inspire other people to be able to do it and continue learning and find their own path in learning. And I did teach for a short time, and I felt like the difference between the way older students took it and younger students, meaning those that were kind of, I'm not going to say forced to go to school, but forced into making a decision as to what they wanted to do for the rest of their lives, weren't as dedicated to the learning process as older students that were making a choice to go back. And I think that as a society, we should be looking to make lifelong learning normal and acceptable just for the sake of learning, and not keep it just for the young people.
Thank you so much, Kay. And I would like to now turn it over to Christine for the next question.
Thank you. The next question is something that's near and dear to my heart because I have a friend who wants to get into a master's program roughly my age. Before students even enter the classroom, admissions processes shape who has access to these experiences. How can prospective students navigate or respond to potential age-related bias in admissions processes, particularly if they feel discouraged or excluded due to being perceived as too old relative to other applicants? And I'd love to hear, I'd love to hear Kay talk about her experiences getting into her program, and then also hear the other two ladies speaking on what we should do in those situations. Thanks.
Thank you. Mine was a non-traditional program. It's a California State Bar accredited program. And so I didn't even have to take the LSAT because I had a bachelor's degree, and I didn't have to take the LSAT. And so the admission process was not terribly onerous, although I will say trying to pull transcripts from the 1970s can be a bit of a challenge. But other than that, I did not experience any of those but I do know that a lot of people do. They struggle with because they have families, or even people that are in the sandwich generation with families and parents and trying to figure it out, and they have mortgages and have to feed their families, and so we don't make it easy for them to get in and go through the process.
Yes, I would like to ask our other two panelists what prospective students should do in those situations when the people they're asking about their master's programs or their higher education are saying, no, you're too old. We want to save these very limited slots for our younger students. Thanks.
Would either Dr. Martin or Dr. Porter like to take that one?
Dr. Porter, I can start. And then if you want to add. Yeah, so the admissions process, I mean, admissions really begins with marketing, right? And so, you know, even our marketing material is oftentimes geared toward students fresh out of high school or still in high school, you know, showing what that college experience could be like. So from the start, admissions can implicitly reinforce these age norms when we think about who should be going to college. And really, when we're thinking about who is attending college and universities, we really have three different age groups, right? We have our traditional age, the 18 to 22 or 23-year-olds. We have the 25 plus age group, and then we have the returning students. Maybe they've been in a career and they're coming back for their second act, or maybe they've been caregivers and wanting to return to the workforce. And so, you know, starting with the marketing materials, really redesigning for that more inclusive student body that the university should be focused on. But more than that, once we get into, so we decided we're going to apply to this university, and to Kay's point, you know, we're looking for transcripts, we're looking for letters of recommendations, academic letters of recommendations. And so what we're doing in higher ed is really rethinking, what does that look like? What does that essay look like? So when I meet with prospective students for my program who's you know, been doing something different, or they haven't been in academia in 20 plus years, I'm asking them to highlight their personal experiences, their professional experiences as part of that essay. So not just why are you interested in this program and what was your academic training leading into this program, but rather how do your professional, your personal experiences, your persistence, your applied learning, all of that should be coming out in that personal statement. And once they apply, or even before application, begin advocating for yourself. Begin asking direct questions about what supports are available for adult learners, right? Because if there aren't any supports, or they're not aware of those supports, that can begin to rise to the top that there may be some age bias happening. So in order to have a truly inclusive academic culture, this genuine inclusive environment, there should be supports for everyone, not just for the younger students that may have I forget what the word is, but they have a plan where it's identified they need supports. But all learners need supports, and so we shouldn't single out any particular age group over another, but we have to ask for it. And then, as Kay said, she went to a non-traditional or adult learner university for her degree. So looking at those community colleges, those adult degree completion programs, institutions with strong transfer or prior learning assessment policies would be important as well. Thank you.
I think a lot of great points have been made. I don't think I have a lot else to add to this question, but I do think just the admissions process itself, I think institutions could be thinking about how to make that process easier for people, providing extra supports for people that might not have had to do these kinds of things for a while. The transcript issue was raised. That's something that we hear about at our institution, even for someone who's not necessarily interested in a whole degree. Having to order transcripts from decades ago seems like too much of a burden for someone, particularly if they're planning to audit a course. Also, that whole issue of making sure that people see themselves in the promotional materials is really important. And it's, of course, I think, really an important time for higher education institutions to be thinking about older students as being another potential pool of students when there are enrollment issues happening at many. Haven't already thought about that from the perspective of enrollment numbers, it's a good time to do it. And then I guess if someone really does encounter someone being ageist, because I'm not sure that everyone necessarily knows that age discrimination is illegal, I think it's a good idea to push back against that. If you hear from someone where they're specifically saying something that would lead you to believe that they're specifically excluding you or not considering you based on age, and if you don't feel comfortable with that person, there's probably someone else at the institution that you could reach out to share your experience, which should not be happening.
Thank you, Dr. Porter. Also, I understand you wrote a paper on charting a future for Canada's age-friendly university. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure, and there's lots I can say about age-friendly universities, but I'll try and keep this relatively brief. But the Age-Friendly University is a global network now of higher education institutions that have committed to 10 principles of an age-friendly university. Many involve older learners, but there's also principles related to research, retirees, and also just allowing older individuals from the community or making them aware that they can engage in the many arts, cultural, and recreation activities. So some of the things that we've done related to being an age-friendly university is forming a committee. We have had a lifelong learning working group that's been having conversations around things like admissions, which we talked about earlier. One of the things that we did when we were approached by some older students when they found out that we were an age-friendly university was to encourage them to form an older student group. And they went ahead and did that. So there is a formal group now at our university, and they meet on a regular basis to share their own experiences. So it has a great effect that way, because within their program, there might not be any other older students. So it enables people to come together from different programs across the university. So it's good for the students, but it's also good for the university, because now we have a group to reach out to find out about their experiences, to involve them in initiatives. So one of the things that we did as a result of having this group is we invited them to take part in a panel for instructors, which was organized by our Teaching and Learning Center, so that instructors at the university more broadly can hear about older student experiences in classes. Something that we've done more recently that I think is going to have big impacts on a positive front for us is we've hired a specialist in anti-ableism and age inclusivity. And so I expect we're going to see a lot more that's going to cut across the whole university related to age inclusivity, particularly in the classroom and interacting with students on a regular basis. We also have had someone who's part of our committee do surveys with older students. We learned a lot about the admissions process, for example, from that survey. And as I mentioned earlier, certainly some of these things around admissions, et cetera, are things that we've learned about by the activities that we've undertaken through Age-Friendly University. And I'll probably say a little bit more later in the conversation about Age-Friendly University, but I think it's a great way for higher education institutions to intentionally try to be more age inclusive in a number of realms, including in the classroom.
Dr. Martin, what stereotypes are commonly associated with older students, and how might these influence faculty expectations, advising practices, or peer interactions?
Yeah, good question. Older students are commonly portrayed as being less technologically capable, for example. So much of our academic learning today is in our learning management systems, our online learning. Even courses that meet in person are often supplemented with that virtual learning for discussion prompts, for example, or some additional feedback. And so one stereotype is that older adult students may be less technologically capable to manage those, that they're slower learners, that it takes them a little bit longer to process the information, to think about the information and be able to respond, that they are overly perfectionistic as far as their grades are concerned, that they are overly anxious, that they're going to be asking a lot of questions about their professors because they want those straight A's. And then maybe even that they're socially isolated, that they're not going to want to engage in the classroom, or that they are disengaged from the learning process. So these stereotypes can influence the interactions with their peers. It can influence faculty expectations. So they may not provide as much feedback, or want to give over an amount of instructions, for example, or they don't challenge them as much as they might challenge younger students. With advising, it may show up as steering them away from certain careers. We heard earlier about someone who wants to go back to nursing school and is concerned that maybe she's too old. And that's something that I hear frequently from students when I'm talking, am I too old to go into this profession? And there are some advisors who may say yes, that given the amount of time that you may be in the workplace and the cost, that maybe it's not, but we shouldn't be doing that, right? We don't know how long someone has, and so we should not be asking them or we should not be discouraging them from any particular discipline, simply based on how old they are, how old they look. We may look at the older student as a representative of all older people, right? We don't do that with any other group. I mean, I've been teaching for a long time, and we were trained, you don't call out any particular person as being a representative, but for some reason, we think it's okay to call out an older student to share their experiences and then use them kind of as that token of here's the adult experience. No, you've heard one experience from one person. That person doesn't represent all older learners. So these assumptions continue to persist despite evidence that older students perform just as well, or sometimes even better than their younger peers, as long as they're adequately supported, right? But it's also advocating for themselves and encouraging them to advocate for themselves as well, because they might not know what resources would be available to them. But something we hear quite often is older adults just aren't technologically savvy. And what I tell people when I hear this is, when we think about today's baby boomers, they were born between 1946 and 1964. The front end of those baby boomers are turning 80 this year, right? They began turning 80, which means when computers really became relevant in our lives, in our workplace, in our professional lives, our personal lives, they were in their mid-50s. So they were using that technology all along. They don't stop knowing how to use technology simply because they're old, but that is a stereotype that we have about someone simply because they're an older person. And we can look at it on the flip side. We think that young people are technologically savvy. However, do they know how to search a database to find the sources for their literature review that they're doing? So, it kind of goes both ways. We have that stereotype that young people are savvy when it comes to technology. We have that stereotype that older people are not. But it really, we have to be more person-centered, student-centered. When we think about that they're slower learners, yes, it may take time to process the information, but a psychological term and one that we use in gerontology is when we look at our fluid intelligence versus our crystallized intelligence, right? Our fluid intelligence is how quickly we're able to respond, and our crystallized intelligence is how we're integrating our learning, our knowledge, using examples perhaps. And what oftentimes we see is that young people are very quick to respond, but oftentimes it's a very surface level response. And for an older person, it may be slower in response, takes time to take in that information and come up with a response, but they're drawing on their personal experiences, their professional experiences, their life experiences. And so oftentimes their responses, if given time, go much more deep. So it's based on all these experiences and all these learnings that really come up with a really solid response that's oftentimes very, very relevant to what was being discussed or what was asked. So they're perceived as being a slower learner, that they take more time, but they're digesting it differently as they're making those connections in those examples. Overly anxious and perfectionistic, we see that with young students as well, right? That students want A's. It doesn't matter who that student is. Yes, you may have some older students that are in your office hours, but our young students don't show up for office hours. And I would much rather have someone showing up to my office hours and asking questions than not asking any questions and then me having to find them to support them. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin, and I'll pass it off to Candace for the next question.
What institutional or classroom strategies have been effective in supporting age inclusivity among students, from what your experience has been in that?
Thank you, Candace. I think, honestly, the availability of online classrooms for people that are not right out of high school, that have family responsibilities, that have financial responsibilities, the ability to go to school and get a quality education on their own schedule without having to quit their job or ignore their other responsibilities, I think has really helped older students to have access to education they might not otherwise have an opportunity to attend. And really, I think that that's kind of the key to it, to a lot of it right now.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Porter, Dr. Martin, do you have anything to add?
One thing that we've done at our university for older students, or any students really, but it was more for older students, is created a companionship service. So individuals might have other caregiving responsibilities that they might need a break from or assistance with. And so that was something that was created. As I said, it's for all staff, faculty, or students. So that might be something that provides extra supports for someone. As I mentioned before, we offered a session with a panel of older students to share their experiences. We also held a session with instructors who have specifically had older students in their classes, and that was for other instructors to share their experience. And I think that was really revealing. We had one person who shared their experience. They often promoted their course in the community to older adults. They really liked having older adults in their class. It brought a new dimension to their class. People's experiences could be added in. And then, of course, the younger students who were in the courses got to see older students, and that can have great impacts for younger individuals seeing older people in a different environment than they might expect. And so that intergenerational engagement is really important, and is one of those other age-friendly university principles that I think it's really important for universities to strive towards. In a lot of ways, our society can be quite age segregated, and so people might not actually be coming in contact with people of different ages very often. And so it's a great way to bring together students of different ages if people actively try and recruit older students to classes, and then these instructors could give tips as well related to older students, overcoming some of those stereotypes that we also heard earlier. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to student age diversity. It's only one part of the picture. Age also shapes teaching, communication, and perceptions of authority, particularly in classrooms where instructors and students may span different generations. So now we'll turn it over to Dana Fleischl.
This brings up a very interesting question. How age can affect communication style? Kay, would you be so kind as start us off?
Sure. I think that we need to first make sure we're all speaking the same language and that we understand each other. Recently, there was this thing with the younger people saying the number 67, and while it didn't mean anything, it was kind of meant to keep a secret from people of other generations, or the concept that younger generations aren't going to understand cursive writing. And and people using acronyms, which regardless of ageism, if people are using acronyms, they need to make sure that the audience understands what those acronyms mean. And I think it's particularly obvious when you're dealing with generational differences in the way we communicate and the words that we use, and just the expressions and what we mean them to be. And I think that in education and in the workplace, we need to be cognizant that we're all speaking about the same thing, and that we're understanding each other, and that we're being understood.
How can institutions and workplaces ensure that technological innovation promotes inclusion rather than deepening age-based disparities?
I would say especially in the workplace, training is so important, and making sure that people are trained. Technology changes so quickly, regardless of whether it's for somebody that's 20 years old entering the workforce or somebody that's 60, and it changes so rapidly that it's so important for educational institutions and workplaces to make sure that their people, their students, are being properly trained and given the opportunity to learn it, instead of just putting them in front of whatever, a computer or whatever it is, and saying, press these keys and you'll get this result. Just making sure they understand what they're doing and are properly trained. Take the time.
I would add, here in the United States, and I don't know what's happening in Canada, Dr. Porter, but here in the United States, we have the new Title II compliance rules, and we went through massive changes in all of our online materials to make sure that they met, and we met our April 25th deadline, only to find out that it got pushed back a year. So, if you design for someone who's visually impaired or auditorily impaired, hearing impaired, you're designing for someone who's older as well. And so, as part of our process going through the Title II compliance, we use a learning management system that tells us how we're doing. So it gives us a percent, and then it tells us where we can fix things. So this audit that was done is a really good process to go through. So conducting these equity-focused technology audits can highlight where someone who may be hearing impaired, which hearing changes do occur as we go through the aging process. So if you're showing videos, to make sure that you have the captions enabled. But this digital accessibility should be part of our DEI planning, right? So I know my university does have a DEI office, and I've been after them to make sure that we get that age piece included in it, and they're expanding, and now their circle does include aging. We haven't done a session yet. But, when we're working with our Center for Teaching and Learning, when we're working with our diversity office, to even begin piloting tools to make sure that it meets those diverse rules. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Dr. Porter, would you like to add?
Sure, and since she asked about whether we have similar things in Canada, yes, we do have provincial or federal laws related to accessibility, and we've had to go through some similar things in terms of our digital communications, all communications, in fact. And I think that's just a good point around accessibility, maybe diverging a little bit from your question, but we also need to make sure if you're expecting students to come physically to campus, that campuses are physically accessible to people, that they're safe environments. Think icy winters here in Winnipeg. So you could have wonderful classes, wonderful instructors, but if people don't feel safe or are not physically able to maneuver around a campus, that can really impair age inclusivity at an institution.
Not only an institution, but the workplace, whether it be, I had someone tell me something about restaurant work where they were feeling the ageism issues, how they didn't want to hire certain servers or managers because they thought they might be stuck in their ways or not be able to tackle the technology. So it's all inclusive. I'd like to pass it on now to Micaiah.
Thank you so much, Terry. And this question is for any of our esteemed panelists who would like to answer. Could you tell us how online and hybrid learning have shifted intergenerational dynamics? Thank you.
I can speak briefly on that. I think it's kind of been an equalizer. Other than that it does tend to isolate people and they're not learning from each other as much. But I think it's been an equalizer in the accessibility of opportunities for learning for all anybody that wants it.
Perfect. Dr. Porter or Dr. Martin, do either of you have anything to add to this question?
I think Kay said it well in terms of that accessibility piece. I think that can make it a lot easier. As I was just referring to physical accessibility, on a campus is challenging, moving long distances between classes. Then having that online option can be great. The social interaction piece, I think, is potentially a problem. And so there might be ways that instructors can intentionally build in opportunities for social engagement, so everyone isn't just staring at a screen of boxes and no one's talking to each other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Dr. Martin, would you like to add any thoughts to this previous question?
Yeah, thank you. I think the only thing that I would add is you know, we've kind of heard two contradictory things, that it is building a sense of community, but it's also isolating. And, you know, I think, as Dr. Porter said, as instructors, we can build that sense of community, with that sense of engagement. But while we do that, in an in-class opportunity, you're seeing what people are looking like. And so behind the screen, you can kind of reduce that ageism where you don't know that someone's an older adult. However, when you're trying to build that sense of community, you're asking them to talk a little bit about themselves. And now they start sharing that I just graduated undergrad and I'm coming into this master's program, or I just graduated X high school. And so that's giving you what their age is. And same thing with older students who might be in the room talking about, you know, how they're returning to get a degree because they've spent the last 20 years raising their children. So that can also then promote ageism between them. So then it's kind of creating those learning opportunities where they're learning from each other, that they're not working in isolation, you know, through the discussion boards, through group assignments, where you can work on that collaboration to build those connections, and again, reduce ageism, because then they're seeing the benefit of learning from the age other. So.
Thank you so much for that insight. I would like to now turn it over to Rich to ask our final question of our esteemed panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Micaiah. I'd like to ask our panelists, invite them to each of our panelists to reflect on the most actionable next steps institutions can take to address ageism in higher education or the workplace.
I guess I can start us off on this. So in terms of intentional steps that institutions can take or workplaces, I think the first is just to realize that ageism is actually an issue. As we've heard earlier, other forms of discrimination receive a lot of attention, but age is quite often just kind of mentioned in a list, and no one's really specifically focused on trying to counter ageism. So it really does need to be intentional. And I would suggest that one way that universities or colleges could do this would be to consider joining the Age-Friendly University Global Network. As the co-lead for the North American region, I can say that these kinds of questions that we've been discussing today are ones that the members of the network discuss when we have our networking meetings. The website itself, even if you're not going to be able to become an age-friendly university, have many best practices that you can learn about. And the Gerontological Society of America has many resources devoted to age inclusivity in higher education. And these can provide lots of ideas for starting points for doing this work.
We are an age-friendly university as well. And so one thing that we're looking at is how do we explicitly include age in our equity, diversity, and inclusion audits? So thinking about how are we marketing our material, who is in our marketing materials, not just gender and race, but looking at those age others as well. Looking at course scheduling. When we created a new program, we realized we were borrowing classes from a program that only offered daytime classes. And our program is for working professionals, but we wanted to use those classes because obviously you want to reduce the workload, right? So we had to think about, okay, can we realistically ask these other instructors to teach their courses in the evening when they're traditionally taught during the day? So thinking about course scheduling, how are they being offered? Are they full-time, right? When we're thinking about financial aid, financial aid oftentimes is based on, are you a full-time or a part-time student? So thinking about that as part of the audit as well. Thinking about our onboarding language, right? Are we saying things like this is intuitive? Well, it might be intuitive for me, but does that mean that it's intuitive for everybody, right? So just kind of thinking about the admissions, the onboarding, the course scheduling is probably something actionable that just working with the DEI office can assist with.
I also think that both in the workplace and in education, we need to be aware that ageism also exists the other way. And it's not just all about how people perceive older people. It's also there in how people perceive younger people. And I think that we need to do a better job, both in the workplace and in education, of looking at people not. A generational difference counts from where you came from, but it doesn't define who you are now. And I think that we need to look at people more in where they're at and then where they came from. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to hand it back over to Terry to close out our session.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists and our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, Candace Russell, Dana Feischel, Micaiah Clark, Richard Hahn, Christine Praria, and our CFO, Vinny, very much. Thank you for our panelists for your time, Dr. Porter, Dr. Martin, and Kai Huffman, JD. We appreciate it. And this wraps up another edition of NALA Microtalks with NALA DEI Committee. We encourage you to explore the links below for additional information. We also welcome your comments. Please like and share on social media. Thank you, everyone.